from don't make it out. I know that I'm blessed. There's a few L's and millions, so turn that loss to a chance.
For those of you that don't know, Jason Ayachi, I hope I pronounced your last name.
Yes, you did, Ayachi.
Correct. So we met as an introduction from a builder that I work with, and we just sort of hit it off. And somebody that I was really impressed with the business that he's created in the recruiting space, and we can go into that. But he is an amazing husband, and he's an entrepreneur, and I think that's really where we connected. And he has developed a sleep product that we'll talk about, and just, dude, excited for you to be here, man.
Yeah, no, great to be here. Really excited to tell the story, give the audience anything that of value that I can. So ask away. I'll do my best to make the show fun.
Cool, dude. Well, so for those that don't know you, why don't you just start by, telling everybody who Jason Ayachi is?
Yeah. So best way to put it at a 30-second clip. So Jason Ayachi, born and raised in Southern California, only child. Grew up surfing, skateboarding, living, most people call the California dream.
But you don't have blonde hair, dude. You grew up surfing?
Yes, yes. I might have put sun in once or twice in my life, but that was back in the day for all of you who know who that is.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, born and raised in Southern California, raised by my mother, played basketball in high school, was going to wrestle, but decided to play the sport where you need to be a 7-foot giant, and decided to take that on. As I grew up older, I decided to go to Arizona State University, where I was in Pike, where I actually met my former co-founder at the time. Enjoyed being there. Arizona was a great time. And about 9 years ago, moved to Colorado and really started my entrepreneurial journey. A big reason we moved here, living in California, very expensive. And, it felt like the right dynamic of people and individuals in this state to really thrive and meet some good people. And so haven't looked back since. And that's kind of what brought us together, was kind of the real estate industry a little bit.
Yeah, man. And, it's really sad to see what's happening to California. I don't know if you remember, but I grew up there as well. And, every time I go back there, I'm like, oh, man, I miss it, right? There's just so much nostalgia there for me. But then I see kind of what's happening within the cities, and, the homeless problem is just off the charts. And, politically, it's just they're not managing their money properly. And you've got a lot of business people that are moving out of that state, and it's really sad. So, hopefully they figure their shit out and attract people back into the state, but it just seems like it's going in the wrong direction right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you, and not to get into politics, but yeah, I mean, I used to live in Santa Monica, Venice for years, and when I go back and visit friends now, it's night and day. It's, I'm more ready to go home than stay on vacation. And yeah, I wouldn't lie if I wouldn't say I haven't tried to recruit a bunch of my friends to Colorado.
Yeah. I feel like that's how it goes down, though. Like, my sister was, like, looking back, she was slowly working on us for years. Like, we were coming out, but when I first came out here, ironically, you're buying a house in Golden, and we would come to Golden because that's where she lived. And I was just like, dude, how does anybody live here? It just, at the time, it felt so slow and run down and old. And, now it's like a gem, right? People will give anything to live in Golden. And, so
Colorado's great. And it's funny, growing up in California, I was like, I'm never leaving. You're never going to find any other better place than this. And I used to have a manager who was from Colorado, and all he did was talk about how great it was. And I'm like, dude, we live in Newport Beach. We're having a great time. Colorado, what? And then I started drinking the Kool-Aid, and like I said, not looking back. And yeah, Golden, we're really excited. I think it blends a little bit of the city and family life, which is what my wife and I are looking for.
There was just an article that came out. I'll have to pull it. We'll put it in comments down below. But it was an article about, I think, Denver, like the #1 city in the country right now for real estate.
Really?
Yeah.
Hopefully I'm buying at the right time. Hey, Mr. Inflation, man,
I know,
those rates
I know,
for me just
I know,
a little,
no kidding,
please.
Man. Holy cow. Well, we did see a little bit of a drop yesterday with the Fed meeting. And I think, even though inflation is not where they want it to be, when Jerome Powell's like, hey, we're going to keep everything the same, I think the market reacted favorably to it. And we saw a little bit of a pullback, but we'll see what happens. It's just a yo-yo right now. It's anybody's guess.
Yeah. Just stay on the path, keep doing what you're doing, and it'll work itself out.
So you said you were raised by your mom.
Yep.
Okay. So your dad wasn't around?
No, Dad was not in the picture.
Okay. What was that like, man, growing up with just your mom?
Yeah, so it's funny. I train at Vital Fitness, and my coach is almost like a performance coach to me. He trains a lot of the UFC fighters, both on physical and mental. And we were talking today about like, who have I become and what is a result of that not having my dad in the picture? And some of the things that kind of were unearthed were the fact that, the feeling of maybe not being good enough and is a reason why I work so hard, why I've gone down the entrepreneurial path and why I drive to success to prove that I am, right? I'd also say on the glass half full side is, by not having my dad around, I wasn't influenced by potentially things that could have negatively impacted me, right? And so my mother, very loving, best woman to her heart. She would do anything for me. She's just such a great individual. And I never was in a house not full of love. And so I was able to kind of take that and use the grit from not having the dad and then the passion and love from the mom to effectively become where I'm trying to go and become, today's self and future self.
Do you feel like, I don't know if you saw Save the Last Dance with Michael Jordan. That documentary,
yeah, way back.
but they talk about how he had like created this chip on his shoulder that drove him. Tim Grover talks about like the darkness and using the dark side to help catapult your success occasionally when you need it, right? But I think back to my parents. They went through a divorce, but my dad, very entrepreneurial, very loving. My mom, very much like, I don't know if she actually ever used the words like, you're never going to amount to anything, but I got this impression that like I was never fucking good enough, So when you say that was something that sort of drove you, or like maybe it was a feeling of not being good enough, are you referring to like, man, this man that's supposed to be my hero just left or isn't in the picture? And so you're saying that kind of created feelings of maybe unworthiness or inadequacy, but that drove you ultimately?
Absolutely. And to kind of the comment, when I was younger, I used to think that my dad not being around was a negative. And as I've gotten older, I've looked at it now as a positive. It's allowed me to break through walls and to not be someone who's going to stop when something gets in the way, right? But I like to tell stories with kind of a visual or picture. So you threw back some videos, comments earlier. So I used to be a big fan of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and I always remember the one episode where Will Smith dad was supposed to come and like take him out of Bel-Air. And he was waiting around, and he never showed. And his stepdad or guardian at the time, I believe it was Uncle Phil, kind of came in, and Will Smith looked at him and he was like, why doesn't he want me? And I'll always vividly remember that moment. And that's kind of how I like to depict why my dad not being around was kind of not good enough. Always the question is, why didn't he want me? And I've never been able to ask him that question. I don't know. And so a lot of things I do maybe are in direct response to be like, I am good enough, or you should have wanted me. But that's kind of something that I like to tell people when we go a little bit deeper, because there's such a visual, and it was like the first time somebody articulated how I felt. And so, yeah, it was a pretty impactful moment for me, funny enough.
Dude, I think it's pretty admirable. Like there's always two perspectives, right? Like one person might say, well, man, my dad left me, so I'm not good enough. And they're living a life that is reflective of that, right? But you took it as the opposite. Even though you have these questions and you haven't been able to get answers to them, you just go, fuck that, dude. I am good enough. And
absolutely.
And you've used it to benefit you in your life.
Yeah. I'm very competitive. And so I think that started the challenge nature in me. As I interview employees, I like to say, do you love to win or hate to lose, right? And I hate to lose more than I love to win. And I think that comes a lot from how I grew up and some of the things that happened. It was just, I'm gonna overcome the odds per se.
When did you know that you were like an entrepreneur at heart? Is this something that just has always been in you, or?
Yeah. So, it's interesting. So my mom is a speech and language teacher. She had the same job for 50, 60 years, one of those, generational type things that our parents used to have. And so I was never surrounded by entrepreneurs. I didn't even know what entrepreneur was. Even my friend's parents, the most entrepreneurial person was a dentist, I guess you could call it. But my mom likes to tell the story. So my grandfather grew up, and he used to work on the subways in New York, and he worked his way up to being a conductor, actually, which was awesome. So a lot of the hard work, I think, is innate in me just through some of my family genes. But when I was in maybe middle school, he took me to a burger joint, and I said, I want to own one of these and run one of these. And at the time, I didn't know what that meant. But early on, I discussed or said things about being an entrepreneur. And it wasn't until later on in life that I realized truly what an entrepreneur was, and that was the path I wanted to follow.
That's cool, man. So when did you end up getting into your current business? And was there any, like, what came before that?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, went to Arizona State. I wasn't going to be a doctor, wasn't going to be a lawyer. I love talking with people, good at business, great at negotiating. And so my best friend's girlfriend's sister at the time was in staffing, and she came visit us at Arizona State, and I was asking her about her job, what she does. And she's like, and these were the glory days, I'm on the golf course with clients, 90% of the time. I'm going to happy hours and dinners, and I'm making well above six figures. And I'm like, light bulb. Okay, I could do this staffing thing. What's staffing, right? So started doing the research, graduated, and I had her set me up with her company in Arizona. And the gentleman I interviewed with, awesome guy who's also in the same fraternity, but at CU Boulder, funny enough. So we hit it off, and he gave me my first kind of chance into the space, and off into the sunset kind of I went. So staffing's really where I cut my teeth, and I did that probably about 8 years with like bigger companies growing and growing, and then eventually was like, okay, I know the playbook. It's time to go, pull that entrepreneurial thread that I've been talking about. So about 11 years solo now doing my entrepreneurial journey.
That's awesome, man. So you were in staffing, but as an employee,
yes,
you learned the business. How long? And you were there for 11 years, or
probably somewhere around like 8 years in total. Six to 8 years.
Okay. So you had a runway where you were just learning and learning and learning and learning. Did you always, while you were doing that, did you, like, in the back of your mind, are you going, eventually I'm going to do my own thing? Was that always sort of a thought, or?
I did have ideas, but
or was it just like, oh, I can make six figures in staffing, let me do that first?
In full transparency, I didn't know how to get to become an entrepreneur. Like, there was no playbook for me to follow, and why I like talking about business, because so many people don't understand how to get there, even if they want it. And so for me, I got caught up in the, W-2, have a good job, make a good salary, do well. And, I was young at the time, and I was living in Santa Monica, Manhattan Beach. So I was just having a blast and enjoying being, an employee and the pressures that don't come with it. It wasn't till I started evolving in the company and really seeing the insides outs of business that I got the confidence to actually make the move. And so I think I needed that confidence trigger is more what it was.
I think that's a good point, and let's stay on that for a second, because there are a lot of people listening to this where they're like, man, same thing. They're in a job, or maybe they love it, maybe they hate it, but they just know it's not cutting it, or it's not what they were meant to do. I think everybody has this understanding within themselves, if they really listen to that voice of, like, I was meant to do something spectacular, right? I was meant to do something great with my life, but when we don't know what it is, like, the thing that always held me back is, and then maybe there's a story I tell myself now, but like, I'm not an inventor, right? Like, I'm not super creative. I can't think of the idea, right? And that was always this block for me. But I think I think the confidence thing is so critical, because it really is. Like, if you think of any product that you use, any service that you use, originally it was some dude that just had the idea, man. Absolutely. And which is so freaking remarkable to me. Like, my sister's an entrepreneur. She started an ed tech company. I remember her talking like out loud at the dinner table about these ideas she was having with the industry and where she thought it was going, and like, really what's needed is this. And as that conversation continued, she developed more and more clarity. And then it was the people around her that were like, you should do that. Like, you've been doing this for a long time, right? 8 years, it was like 20 years in education for her. And then eventually she goes, I'm going to fucking do it. And she did, right?
It's amazing.
But like, talk a little bit about that process mentally for you when it was like you're at the job, you're in staffing, and now you're starting to have this, you know, this intuition, this kind of gut feeling that you were meant to do something else, and now you've got some confidence. What made you go after recruiting and doing that for your business?
Yeah. So I'll answer it in a couple parts. One really focuses on so many people who want to get into business think they have to create the next Apple or be the next Jeff Bezos, where, as you mentioned earlier, the majority of individuals just take what's out there and make it better. There's a gentleman called Marty McCann. He's like the godfather of product in Silicon Valley. And he's like, Google wasn't the first search engine, right? As an example, he's like, Apple wasn't the first, power computer. But what they did was they took a concept and they made it 10x better, right? And so for me, like I said, I was in the recruiting business 6 to 8 years before taking the leap. I learned it and I said, how could I make this better? How could I treat my clients differently? How could I go after different markets? How could I learn from the clients that I even recruited for? And so that gave me the confidence to take the leap. And I just had to execute on what I already knew versus trying to light the world on fire, right? Recruiting, there's thousands of companies out there, right? Mortgages, real estate agents. It's about differentiating yourself. And then taking a playbook and executing on it. And I think that word execution is key. And that's what actually holds most people back. If you look out there, 90% of the people are on YouTube, they're researching, but they never do. At some point, that execution mark makes the difference between an entrepreneur and somebody who stays at the job that is unfulfilling, as you noted earlier.
By the way, that was me to a T, dude, for the last couple of years. And it was really, I've talked about this on the show before, but it was like really... I was pissed off, dude. I was like mad at myself because I knew all I was doing was this research, and it's amazing. I even have this thought now where like, it's amazing how easy it is to convince yourself you're watching this to learn. But then, a year goes by and you're like, okay, this is really just entertainment, right?
In your mind, you're working up stories like, I'm moving the needle, and you're like, okay,
Right.
one more video, one more business plan. And, as you know, we've been in business long enough. Business plans are great, but until you do it, you have no idea. Everything goes out the window, right? So it really is, if I could give anybody one piece of advice, if you're ready to do it, just go do it. You'll learn so much by being in it versus ideating and structuring it. Like, people just get lost in this ethos of, I could do this, or I could do that, or I could do one of these things, or, I don't have it perfect yet, right? Like, I'm a brand guy. I love brand, and we'll talk more about some of my companies and stuff. And looking at your studio, you're a brand guy, right? How long did it take you to launch your first podcast before you had the right cameras, the right studio setup, the right lighting?
It was 2 years of bullshit. But once I did the first episode, it was like, I don't know how to explain it, but it was like this. It was like God was here, dude, and was like and all of a sudden they're all these little things like, I don't want to look at my watch, so let me make sure I get a clock back here so I don't have to look at my watch and make the guests feel uncomfortable. But within 2 weeks, I knew more than I did after 2 years of research.
Exactly. Now imagine if you started 2 years ago,
I know.
Where would you be today?
Yeah.
You might have 10 team members instead of the 2 right here, right? You may have a bigger studio, right? A media company board. And so that's what people forget. Like, time is real, and time is our most precious asset, is what I like to say. Recently turned 40. And as I look at it is, where am I going to spend my time on what I'm doing and with who? And I think the sooner people start to really focus on that earlier on in age, I think the further they'll go.
For sure. Like what iteration of, you used Apple as a reference earlier. What iteration of Apple are we on now for the iPhone? What is it, 15, 16, 17?
I mean, at this point, it doesn't matter, because it's just more like, oh, another cool product, take my credit card, right? Like,
right.
I saw like some meme where they're like, people just have their cards on file, so the next iWatch comes out or the next MacBook, it just gets auto-shipped.
Well, dude, I didn't even know that existed. My brother's like, oh yeah, I just pay a monthly fee and I automatically get the new one every single time. I'm like, that's cool.
Yeah, and that goes into brand, right? But to build a brand, I had a gentleman, he's a CMO of a CPG brand, and he's like, it takes 8 years. So, that's why time is important, and also getting started early is because it takes a longer lifeline than most people think. You
Sure.
see a lot of online courses and all these things, and yes, they can definitely make money. But to build something substantial, you look at the billionaires today, the people who are making $100 million. It wasn't a 2-year thing, and then their business got acquired, right? They were slowly working their way up, and they called the 10-year overnight success.
Yeah, Anthony Robbins has a good quote where most people overestimate what they can do in 5 years, but underestimate what they can do in a decade.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely. And even in a year, like if you go like hard on something for a year, you can make a lot of progress. And so for people who maybe are afraid that listen to this to take the jump, give yourself a year, see what happens, right? And then evaluate it at that time. And I guarantee you'll be further than you think, or you'll know it's not for you, right? But the longer you kick the can, the less likely you are to probably do it.
I think the thing that's tricky for a lot of people, is like, okay, I've got this job, but I want to do this thing that I know can fulfill me, that can make me more money. It's going to be better long term, but God, I got to bridge how do I bridge the gap? I don't really have all this savings. So I'm just curious, like your own thoughts on, do you encourage somebody to just rip the Band-Aid off and go all in, even though it's scary, it's new, they haven't been on this journey before? Or do you say, dude, like you got to just work 100 hours a week and like make it happen, right?
Yeah, I would say earlier in my career, it was work 100 hours, make it happen. Now when I advise, so I'm part of EO and I advise sub 7-figure businesses. And a lot of times I tell them, before you really make a huge jump or you rip the Band-Aid, because a lot of them are doing kind of part-time, 2 feet different boats, have about a year saved up on your minimal expenses. Because one of the things I learned early on in entrepreneurship was when money runs out, you make bad decisions. And when you make bad decisions, you impact the business. And by impacting the business, you're not going to get to where you want to be, right? But I encourage saving about a year runway. And if you have a good job and you can kind of do both, I think you should have the side hustle until the side hustle becomes the hustle. And that's actually what I'm doing right now. So I own a recruiting company called Proper Search, focused on executive recruiting, high growth companies, place the C-suites of, venture-backed startups, PE-backed companies. Super fun for me, fintech, CPG, et cetera. But one of my passions, while I'm great at recruiting, I wouldn't say I wake up every morning and be like, recruiting is what gives me energy. And over COVID, we can go into that story a little deeper, but there was some tough times being in recruiting, as everybody knows, right? Yeah, people stopped hiring, people got laid off. You went from in office to home. Nobody knew what was going to happen. And so our team slowly shrank to make sure that we could, survive long enough. And during that time, I wasn't sleeping well. My health was falling apart. And so, I was like, you know what? Let me solve my own problem. Let me do something I'm passionate about. And so I created a health and wellness brand focused around creating products that people could use to live their most optimal life. And we started with sleep. And that today is I work that after hours or weekends, and it's my side hustle, and recruiting is what pays the bills. And the goal is to eventually grow them both in unilaterally. But yeah, it was, taking the leap, doing what you can, but filling your time with things that give you energy too.
Dude, I think that's so important. But in order to fill your time with things that give you energy, you also have to cultivate energy to give, right? You and I have talked a lot about this, cold plunging, just energy, health and fitness. I'd love to talk about that a little bit. Yeah. But before we go any further, where can people find you?
So Jay Ayachi is my social media handle. You can also follow my supplement company at Really Awesome Products on Instagram. And then propersg.com is my executive search business.
Sweet. All right, cool. So let's talk about the sleep product first. So this is a great segue into that, because how did you have the idea? Like, how was that born?
Yeah. So I'm one of those like you where I like to have things as good as it can be before I come to market, because the fear of failure is real. No matter what anyone tells you, no one wants to fail. And so if you think your baby you never bring it to market when it's good enough, but you also don't want it to fail flat, right? And so, what I did was definitely a lot different than most supplement companies. So I said, you know what? This is the problem I want to solve. Who can help me solve it? And given sleep is one of those things, it's not like a probiotic or something you can put a B12 in or some greens. It's like it either works or doesn't. So I said, okay.
Why did you want to solve sleep though?
Sleep was an issue for me. Yeah. So okay. I've always had sleep issues. And
like falling asleep or staying asleep?
It depends on the day. It's kind of I wouldn't venture to say insomnia, but I have that monkey mind, as an entrepreneur, it's hard to shut off. So sometimes I'll fall asleep well, but then I'll wake up. Other times I can't fall asleep and then I'll fall asleep, 4 a.m. type of thing. So maybe somebody calls it insomnia. I don't want to go that far. But I was like, you know what? They always say do what you love or solve your own problem. And I was like, you know what? Sleep's a crowded space, but let me just do something for myself, right? This venture was more about for me than going in, lighting the world on fire and saying, I need to be the next Athletic Greens, right? And so I said, okay, who in my ecosystem could I reach out to? And so a friend of mine that I went to high school with actually happened to go to university with the head of sleep and neurology at Cedars-Sinai. And so I kind of did what I do, told a story, pitched the idea, told them the why, and got the introduction. Then I did that with, his name is Arun, Dr. Arun, told him the story, the why. And, a lot of his patients obviously suffer from sleep. And so he was also looking for other ways to help treat them naturally. And so we took it a step further where we really wanted to say, okay, sleep is one item to solve, but how do we impact the whole body? So if you think about during the day, you deplete your vitamins, your nutrients, right? You're kind of worn down. So how do we help you sleep, but also provide you the vitamins to replenish your body during that time period while you're just in bed lying still so that you can wake up feeling better? And so kind of what I like to say is if you sleep good, you do good. Or you feel good. If you feel good, you do good, right? And that's what we're really trying to do is help people live optimally and feel at their best so that they can build their new business or grow in their career at their current job.
Dude. Okay, so I'm curious to know your thoughts on this because especially as an entrepreneur, right? There are people in this space that have a big personal brands that it's almost a badge of honor to say like, I don't need any sleep, right? Like, give me 4 hours, I'm good to go, right? If I only sleep 2, when you're that excited about something, you don't need sleep. There's that train of thought, but then there's also what you just said, which I can see both sides, but like I've definitely experienced when I don't have enough sleep, especially now with kids, dude. Like when I don't have enough sleep, it's like, dude, I can't, and I don't know if it's because I've gotten older, what it is, but I can't function, dude, without, now I don't have to have 8, right? Like I could function off 6, right? I could probably go 5, like maybe once a week kind of a thing. But what do you say to the people that are like, you don't need sleep? Like if you've got a big enough purpose and why you could get away with, you think it's just their personal chemistry or what?
So what I would tell those people are come back and talk to me in a year and let's see where you are. And the reason I say that is because burnout is real. There's only a certain amount of ways you can push, right? And then I'd also flip the coin and say, how do you feel when you sleep good? Tell me. Right. And more often than not, people are going to say, I had an awesome day. I closed that deal. I pushed it harder. I went one more. And there's a direct correlation. Right. I also think with sleep, there's a misnomer around it's about the amount of hours you're in bed. While there is an importance factor to that, it really is around the type of sleep you get, the quality of sleep. So there's a thing called REM and deep sleep. Deep sleep really is focused on helping you recover muscular, right? REM is very much around your brain and cognition. And so you want to get a balance of the two. And that's where most people struggle. That's why some mornings you might have slept for 8 hours, but being like, man, I feel a little out of it because you didn't get enough REM sleep. But the days you get a lot of REM sleep, you're like, man, I feel like a human dictionary. Somebody asked me a question, I got it. I'm on the move, right? So at the end of the day, I would challenge the thought that you could push and sleep isn't important. I think there's always a balance to it. And, look, if you've got a deadline or you've got a pitch to an investor, pull that all-nighter. I'm not saying don't do that, but I'm saying sleep should be a variable people are focused on if they want to perform at their best.
Why'd you start with sleep?
Yeah. So again, this business I decided to build for myself, and sleep was really the key issue. And, there are also a lot of things out there that can give you energy. There's Celsius, there's rain, there's, nootropics, etc. Disclaimer, I'm not a doctor. I'm hearing some mixed reviews. I still personally do drink it, but to each their own is what I would say. I think too much caffeine in general is not good for you. So if you're having multiple Celsius or anything, yeah,
Sure.
probably something. But yeah, I don't know. I don't go deep down that path of, whether it's overly good for you or not. I just try to do things in moderation when it comes to caffeine.
This is going to seem like a total non sequitur because it is, but as you were talking about just having like monkey brain and like constantly be thinking about stuff, I'm just curious, do you keep like a notepad by your nightstand, or like do you have any sort of process or habit if you wake up and you have a great idea? I feel like sometimes I'm dreaming and I'm like, in the dream it's fucking this phenomenal idea, and then I like, in the dream, I'm telling myself, you got to wake up and write this down, but then I don't. And then I'm pissed off in the morning when I forget.
I go through evolutions. Right now in this season, I'm journaling before bed to try to get all my thoughts out, and that's been helping me. I've done the journal on bed. I've done the iPhone notepad. I've tried to not go too deep to like waking up and doing that, because then I'm just not going back to bed. I just go down the rabbit hole. That's how if I see a thread, I'm going to pull it. And so like next thing you know, it's might as well say I'm already up. So
Sure.
Try not to do that. That's why the journaling before bed's kind of been helpful for me. And then, at the moment that's working pretty well.
So journaling before bed, what do you think it is that happens? I'm constantly talking to my wife about this because my wife will have these ideas, right? But then like the delivery or the execution won't follow.
Yep.
And it's just like, babe, you have to write this down no matter what. It starts with writing it down, and, it's a constant conversation. But what do you think it is that you get as an individual from getting it out of your head and putting it onto paper?
I think the first thing is when you see it on paper, you instantly know, is it a good or bad idea? So I think that by getting it, like, just like if you're going to do a speech, it sounds great in your head when you do it. And then when you verbalize it, like, oh, fix that, change that, change that. So you instantly get a little bit of a better gut check is what I would say. And then from there, if you're feeling good, you've done the first step. You've put something on paper, right? Now it goes back to that execution piece and to the steps that follow. That idea, what is next, right? And so a lot of people, what I would say is if you have an idea, write the idea down and write the next 1 to 3 things you need to do to validate that idea to see if it's worth exploring.
That's a good tip right there. What about, do you do any like gratitude stuff at all?
Yeah. So I ebb and flow. I did the 6-minute journal, and there's a gratitude section. Right now I'm doing free form journaling, just whatever thoughts are in my head. Part of it's gratitude, part of it's, manifestation type content. Hey, let's close this deal, or what's the next SKU I should create? How is that going to come to me?
Is it all business though, or like is it relationship stuff?
Yeah.
Is it just whatever?
It's kind of what I'm feeling that day. Sometimes I'll just say like, man, I should have been a better husband this day. Or like, my wife and I had an amazing day. We went to Golden. We did this. We hiked. We went in the river and cold plunge, right? So it really just depends. I try to just not force it, and just whatever I'm feeling, like that's the kind of journaling I'm doing right now, is just let it rip. And then just taking the step back and to assess it. One of the things that, as an entrepreneur, I'm sure you can relate to this, right? We chase, right? We're always like, okay, what's tomorrow going to be? The next day, the next day, the next year. I'm really trying to focus more on like the now, right? To, 1 day at a time, 1 week at a time, 1 month, then 1 year, not like, okay, where could this podcast example be a year from now, versus no, let's have a great day today. Let's make this podcast the best one and just keep going. Which has been a challenge for me because I'm I don't want to lose. And so I'm like, what does the future hold? How do I get to that end goal? Instead of being like, you know what, just enjoy the journey, enjoy the ride, right? Enjoy the people I'm with. And if you do it right day by day, you will get there.
I think a lot of times, especially as a new entrepreneur, I think a lot of people shit on like the fancy cars and making a lot of money. But I think there's a reason why that's so important in the beginning, to have something that's creating a bigger why and drawing you toward it, right? Because, dude, if you don't have a lot of money, you can't help a lot of people, right? Yep. You can't give a lot of money away. Like all the things you really want to do that serve humanity and people, it's not as easy to do. You can give time, right? But you can make a bigger impact with money. And so if the thing that motivates you up front is having a lot of it, or, having a fancy car, I think that that's something to be okay with, right? Not feel bad about that. But, you talked a little bit about manifesting. I want to talk about that because it's something that I absolutely love. But a lot of people focus on acquiring. Really, it's about being and becoming, right? It's who you're becoming in the process rather than what you're going to get. And the validation we think sometimes is what you're going to get and acquire. Really, the validation should come from who you are becoming and those daily habits, right?
Absolutely. I would say a couple things to that. There's a lot out there, like you said, about like, oh, it's bad to want the car or the Rolex. If that's what you want, that's what you want. So go do it. Don't shy away from who you are. If that's what motivates you, then let that be the driver. And 9 out of 10 times, as you get that watch and that car, those will become less important, and then something else becomes important, right? It's about chasing it, hitting those milestones. From a manifestation perspective, it's interesting. So I've been kind of doing this like 6-minute meditation, and one of the things is kind of visualize yourself.
6 minutes?
6-minute or 6-step meditation. I think it's over like 20 minutes. But one of it is visualize where you want to be 3 years from now, as an example. And when I visualize it at the moment, it's very much around the life that I have, not the things that I have, like who I'm with, where I am. And what's funny is if I unpack it, I see the success that's happened because of it, right? The cars are there, the house is there because of the environment that I'm in, right? And the people I'm with. So I think there's a lot of ways to get there, but just like in business about executing, I think it's just doing, just trying, just being in the moment, not trying to change who you are or what you want. You are who you are, you want what you want, and own it, right? And just try to be real. And the way to be real is be real with yourself first.
Dude, I think there's two sides to the coin, right? There's like, and we live in a society that's very much about like, oh, but you don't need that, right? So, and there's this sort of difference between needing something versus wanting something. And if you really think about it, if you're really being honest with yourself, wouldn't you rather live in a world of wants? Like, wouldn't you rather? Because when you think about living, well, I don't need that, really what you're saying to your subconscious is that it's a scarcity mindset, right? Because you're focused on saving money. You're focused on just getting what is absolutely critical, which I think it sends a signal to your brain that says, like, you're not able to accomplish, and you should just be okay with less.
You're sitting in that limiting belief.
It's a limiting belief. That's exactly it. Versus, think about a world where you have the ability to do anything you want. And I think it's one of the drivers for a lot of entrepreneurs, but definitely for me, it's like, dude, I believe in this abundant universe, right? Like, I don't think I've ever seen God skimp on a sunset, right? Like, but training my brain to think that way, dude, that's a whole other story. So I constantly have to put myself in a place where I'm realizing the dichotomy of situations going, okay, yeah, maybe my self-talk is, well, I don't need that, right? Because I'm trying to conserve cash or whatever the reason is. But I don't know, just constantly working towards framing things in a way where it's like, no, but that's what I want. And I think you said it, right? If you really want the Lambo or the Rolex or the big house on the beat, whatever it is, dude, that's like the universe giving you a leg up going, then it's showing you what you have the ability to go get. And I don't know, that's how I think of it anyway.
Yeah, motivation is something that's fleeting, right? And so a lot of times you need things to keep that motivation going. And that's why some of the, material things, we'll call it the cars, the houses, a lot of people lead on because it helps those days when they're not motivated, right? And I'll give you a good example of that. So the home we're buying in Golden, this week's been like great week, but also a lot of deals waiting to hit. And so getting a little anxious and, grinding, putting in the hours. And so, I told my wife, I'm like, you know what, let's go see why we work so hard. We drove to the house, we walked it, and it was just like, you know what, that was what I needed at that time to say, this is why I do what I do, and I work as hard as I do, right? She's my reason, getting this house and providing for us and creating the family we have, right? And providing us the lifestyle we want, right? And I'm not going to shy away from that. I didn't need that house. We have a great place now, but I wanted it. So I'm going to chase that want, right? And I was going to say, and the last thing I would say is I think there's a big difference between the need and want, like you said, where entrepreneurs lean more toward the want side. Staying as an employee lead more toward the need, because there is the scarcity mindset a little bit, right? Of like, this is the safest place and zone for me to be in, which there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we all own businesses. We need those individuals, and that's what, helps us thrive. But at the end of the day, the want comes with a risk. And to get what you want, you just have to be willing to take that risk.
That's a good way of saying it, dude. So talk about a little bit about like your morning routine. I know you and I have talked about 75 hard. Dude, I'm like, this guy's my kind of people, because we were talking about 75 hard and you like texted me the thing which showed all the red days, like read it out on the app. And I'm like, man, I think at the time I was at, do you remember? It was like day 40 or something.
Yeah, right? you were far enough along that I knew you were committed, but you still had a ways to go. You hit a couple of roadblocks that were like, should I keep doing this? But you weren't quite there yet. But yeah, and I was one of those where, for anyone who doesn't know 75 Hard, it's an amazing program. And last year, I just felt like, what, I wanted to come into 2024 feeling like my best self. And I was like, you know what? Similar to self-talk, I'll convince myself to not work out or not do things. But if I commit to somebody or something, then I'm all in. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to do it over the holiday. So I was the wild man that did it, started before Thanksgiving, did it through Christmas and New Year's. And it was phenomenal. I highly recommend it. But to the morning routine, I've learned that slower mornings are better for me. Like if I just jump into the grind, the day tends to just be the grind, right? You just kind of don't stop. So what I've started to do is in the morning, kind of that 6-step meditation that I talked about. I hop in my cold plunge for 2 to 3 minutes. And the reason I love the cold plunge, it's the hardest thing that I've done on a regular basis almost ever. It sucks every time, right? It's a mental conversation. You got this. And then as soon as your toe hits, you're like, do you want to pull it out? But you gotta just go in. And I mean, it's funny because you hear all the time it's this cult or it's this thing, but like for anyone who's never cold plunged, try it. And for the ones that have, you'll know what I'm talking about.
I heard the new Lifetime Fitness has a bunch of cold plunges, so I think that's where I'm going to go to try it out first. And
yeah, and I'm the guy, my wife was like, buy some ice, fill up the bathtub first before you go buy the plunge. And I'm like, I'm not going to get ice bags. Like, I need this to be convenient or it's not happening, right? And so I just was like, one day, I'm like, babe, it's on its way.
Up, like outside?
In my garage. So we only have one car and we have 2-car garage. So we have that and then have the infrared sauna. So
1-car garage in my cold plunge room.
Yeah, it's nice. And it's great too because my wife will be upstairs and hear me scream like a little girl sometimes. Yeah. If you take days off from doing it, it just gets even harder. And then I love when friends come over. I'm like, sit in there. And they're just like, oh, God. So it's great.
The live hard thing, right? After 75 hard, it talks about doing 5-minute cold shower.
Yep.
And I feel like, for me, I feel like the cold plunge would be easier than the cold shower. I don't know why, because it's almost this mental, like, I'm committing to frickin' submerging my entire body. Whereas the shower, it's like this trickle that you have. I don't know.
So
have you done both?
So before plunging, I used to end my shower cold every day, not for 5 minutes in full transparency. But the difference about the cold plunge, why I think it's harder, is you can't escape it. When it's the shower, your shoulder may not be cold or your leg might not be cold. But when you're in the cold plunge, you're just stuck.
Could you get like literally stuck because it's so cold? Like
no, I mean,
like aware to get out at least.
If you stayed in there for 20 minutes and you've never done it before, right? But like, enough units have been sold, enough people have done it, and everyone's still okay that I'm pretty sure you're not going to get stuck. But yeah, it's just one of those things where like it is more mental than anything. And what's kind of been great about it is like, whether it's at the gym or work, it's like that moment where you're just like want to quit or give up. It's the same thing as a cold plunge, to say that next 30 seconds. And so it builds this kind of thing in you. And it's weird. I never thought that I would like gravitate so much toward it. But there's so many lessons to it that I think are impactful. I do my like phone and I just hit it. I have like the little pad thing and I just hit the clock button on the phone.
It's actually interesting because it is all mindset, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you're
Physical, you definitely feel the physical, but
yeah.
it's the mind is what keeps you in or takes you out.
Right. Like, okay, so you get in. Now, let's say you're holding onto the side, you're doing a plank right above the freaking water, and then finally you're like, all right, I'm going, and you dunk in, and immediate. It's just such a shock to the body, right? What, like the first time you did it, and I'm curious to know if it's changed too now that you've done it many times, but like, what is it in your brain that like are you just so shocked you don't like, how do you power through, I guess?
It's almost, so the first
to
time
stay
was very much like fight or flight almost. Like my body was so not ready for what
Right.
was about to happen. And then
is it ever though? I don't.
and then it went to straight mindset. So the difference between when I started and now is my mindset of like, this is going to hurt. This is going to suck, but you've done it before, right? You can do it again. And then it's just a matter of going in. Then you know, don't let the self-talk happen. And I'm one too, where I know a lot of people, they'll do like the sauna to cold plunge. Like I just go in straight cold, like just
Do they
straight from
recommend
bed.
something like that? Or-
Contrast therapy is really recommended for recovery, and it's great if you can do it. But I don't have time to sit in the sauna for an hour, back and forth. So I'll do the sauna, which I have one, but I focus more on the cold plunge. And I always tell people if I could have one, I think the cold plunge, just from the mental side of things, that like, I'll tell you what, the days that I call it quits earlier, man, I feel like I gave up, and it's like, don't do that again. Like, so I even learned both sides, from the staying in and the giving up.
Sure. Well, it's funny because even though we all want the success, right? We want to be able to say we did it, we accomplished this thing. Really, all of the lessons, all of the enlightenment, all of the reward, I think all of it is found in the failure. It's all found in, because you don't like when everything's going well and everything's perfect and great and like you don't have any adversity, you're not learning shit.
Yeah.
Right? Like the only time you're learning anything is when you're struggling through something or you're being challenged by something. It's making you become more creative. It's helping develop this sort of unbreakable, mindset, right? How has that, like, proving to yourself that you can do the hard things, how has that transferred into your business?
Yeah. So I think there's a few ways for me to look at it, but I'll take it back to the COVID timeframe, right? So we had about 30 employees. At the time, we were building like a recruitment automation platform, as well as our agency business. And, we had raised some money from some high net worth individuals, family offices, et cetera. And COVID happened. And then at that moment, we had to make key decisions, which meant, furloughing people, laying people off. The company wasn't bringing in any money. And during those times, that's kind of where I was most challenged, I would say, in my life as an entrepreneur, where like that mental toughness had to come in. And I think there's two ways people go about things. The one way is take it head on and fight until there's no fight left to be had. And then the other is clam up, poor me, and let's just see what happens. I'm of the mentality of the first, where I'm going to take this head on. I'm going to do everything I can to keep this baby alive, right? Long story short, we ended up selling our book of business to the investors. They made a few $1 million. It didn't make much, which we can always get into if you want it another time. But what I learned from that lesson in mental toughness was that, one, I will be okay, and two, I will not break. And to me, that was like the biggest aha moment that I've had, I think, in my career, because there's always the fear of failure, always the fear of it's not going to work out. And going through that lesson taught me that I'll always be able to endure, and it's never going to be worse than it was then.
Sorry, I was just thinking about, it's interesting because I've gone through two big moments in my life where it was really tested everything financially.
Yep.
One of them is now. The other one was in 2008 when the real estate market crashed. Now, back then, that was the first time I had ever made any kind of real money, at least I thought it was real money at the time. And it was, I was making some good money. I had a nice house in Southern California, but I was definitely the individual then that clammed up. Like, I was a little baby, dude. Like, I was scared. Like when you're in your 20s making, I was making hundreds of thousands of dollars, like high six figures. I lived in a, $2 million home in Sherman Oaks. I lost everything, bro. I mean, 7, 8 foreclosures. I was really unhealthy, dude. I was addicted to OxyContin at the time. I went through a divorce. That's when I moved to Colorado, dude. But like, this was a time, like I was literally, now I look back and I'm like, it just proves to me like life is happening for us, dude, not to us.
What you went through and like what I went through has helped shape who we are today. And that version is we are both in better positions. We're probably both happier. I can't speak for yourself, but we've grown our businesses. We've taken things to different levels because of what we've been through. And I think, back to my dad, I kind of got hit early on with that shock factor of like that hit in the face, right? And I think how I grew up and things that I had to learn a little bit, maybe the hard ways. And I had a great upbringing, don't get me wrong, but, I had to observe and learn a lot through watching people because I didn't have a lot of people around, right? My mom was a working mom. And so, I think I was equipped to handle certain situations better than others, right? And so I take pride in that, but I think that that's where in entrepreneurship, the rubber meets the road with a lot of successful people is it's going to be hard, to your point, right? It's going to be good, bad. And when things are good, you don't know you're not prepared for anything that could come at any moment, right? And so, yeah, I think it happens, like you said, it happens for us. And I think that's like the glass half full way to look at it. And most people don't. They more say like, why is this happening to me, right? This isn't fair. I don't deserve this versus how can I learn from this? How can I be better from this? How do I allow this to never happen again, right? And I think to your comment earlier on framing, it's all how you frame things.
I'm fascinated, by the way, right now with framing. Like, I'm so fascinated by it that like I want to like write a book about it just for my own research on how to do it. Ed Milet's probably one of the best I've ever heard at framing. Like, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, I love listening to him. He's so good.
He's so good, dude. But
Ed Milet, bring us both
shout
on
out.
the podcast.
Let's go, bro. Let's do this. All right. So, but back then, dude, I was the guy that clammed up. I was scared. I didn't know. I don't know. But then going through issues now, relationship issues, financial concerns, dude, it's hard to explain, but I'm really fucking proud of myself, dude. Like I'm proud of this because I could very easily or could have very easily clammed up and, gone back to the drugs and, like really driven myself into the ground. But now looking back, man, like I've had the ability to literally every challenge, dude. And I was being attacked by challenges over the last year. Every single one of them, it was like, what's next? What's next? What's next, dude? I just can't. It's like you build this confidence and ability to frame everything glasses half full. And when you really believe it, and you really believe that the glass is half full and you frame it that way, it's amazing how, dude, life kind of moves you in that direction, right? Like there's nothing good that comes out of feeling sorry for yourself and just, but I don't think if I went through that experience before that I would be the same way now or have the ability to operate in the same way as I did.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like to me, you got through it and you realize, wow, I can't be broken, or my threshold is way higher than I thought. And you at that time gave yourself the grace to say, I can do this, right? Like I'll get through it. And so now when it comes, that experience, you can lean on and be like, I made it through that. I'll make it through this. Right. And so that's where, why executing, going in now, getting those experiences, because those experiences are going to help you get through the hard times, because you got to learn. Right. Like
totally.
You can't, unless you're some savant or some genius, right? You get better at things by doing them.
Well, and I think it's, part of the issue with like social media right now is that everything we see is a highlight reel, right? Everything we see is the person that is successful, right? The overnight success that really fucking took them 20 years or 10 years, or if you're Wes Watson, 4 years, right? The guy was like an anomaly, but
was he? He was doing all his work while he was in jail for 7 or 8 years. So you add that up, he's a decade plus in.
But also, like, I love that dude's message, right? It's like the work instills the worth, right? It's like doing the work instills the worth and makes you feel more confident in your ability to continue to do things. But just that message of like the daily habits, right? And just never missing is just a message I love to hear. It's helpful for me to hear it too, right?
Yeah. So in this journal right here, I follow Real AF, Andy Friselis, I believe, but he calls it the power list. And basically it's 5 tasks a day. If you crush those tasks, you've won the day, right? And it's all about building habits, because habits are based on discipline, and discipline really is what you get there, right? Because motivation, as I noted, is fleeting, right? The watch motivation is going to fleet at some point, but the discipline of waking up, going in the cold plunge, or showing up at the office at X time, putting in the work is going to happen. And I think it's just one of those things where to my comment, you got to crawl, walk, run, right? You just got to keep progressing daily. And my kind of new focus on things when I think business is if I just keep focusing on the right clients and the right business, over time, I'm going to pick my head up and my business will be where I want it to be, versus every deal, every call, every message matters so much, because it's just hard to enjoy the day or the moments, right? Because you're just so like live or die by every deal. And it's like, just keep getting more deals, and over time they'll stack up. But to your social media thing, because I think it's a great point to touch on. I mean, it's manufactured reality right now. It is unbelievable. And I use the simple example, the new Google commercial. The Asian guy is looking and he's dancing. And what he does is he takes his picture, he makes the clouds look different, and then he lifts himself up so it looks like he jumped 2 to 3 feet in the air. I'm like, okay, so this picture's not real. It's manufactured. He can't really do that. But that's what everyone thinks it's a real thing, right? It's just, it's a bit frustrating. I'm a little scared for some of the youth these days.
You said you're 40, I'm 43,
Yes, I'm not the oldest guy on the podcast.
No, you're not. But, like all of my coaching, the way I kind of grew up, everything was really about, well, it's still about trust, but everything was about developing trust differently through this. And I think and I actually think this is what people crave and want and really yearn for, is that face-to-face. But, it is slowly becoming kind of this old school way of doing things, right? Because now you've got content creators, you've got podcasts. I think, in fact, you were the one that was telling me, right? Like by 2030, there's going to be 110 million podcasts or something.
Yeah, I mean,
crazy.
It's slated to be one of the largest media outlets growth around, right? And one, I think there's low barriers to entry, but two, people just love to absorb content, and from what I find, and even myself, people like to see what other people are doing. Like people are fascinated by what they don't know.
Well, there's a couple ways to build trust, right? One is transfer of trust, right? In fact, we're going to lunch with my buddy Chris here in a second, who owns Fight Fingers, and you're going to have just an immediate initial trust for him, not because you've ever met him or know him, but just because he's close to me, and we've developed a relationship, right?
The 2 to 3 degrees of separation, right?
So there's the transfer of trust, but then the other way is time. And with content, when you really think about what's happening, if you or I say something that goes viral, or somebody watches this and they go, man, what else does this Darik guy have? Or what else does this Jason guy have? They go on a search for it, right? And if they can't find it, they're like maybe a little let down. If they can't find it, it's like Netflix, man. You binge watch it, right? And you're like, oh, I love everything this guy's talking about. But it's them spending time with you, which is ultimately building trust. And then they want to know what they can buy from you.
Yeah.
Right. So where I know that this is something I'm super passionate about right now. I'm just like, I really believe it's the future. I also believe it gives you the ability to serve humanity on a higher level and tap into a greater purpose. See, I was always selfish around it and very egotistical, saying, well, first of all, why would people want to listen to me? Right. Number two, like, oh, I don't want to be the cheese dick that's like, you know, some salesy guy. Like, I don't want to be perceived that way. And then it was like, well, what are people going to think? And, you know, all of this stuff. Right. But then I realized, well, I think that's normal. Yeah, I think everybody does that. But then it's like, man, at the same time, like, you've got an incredible story. Everybody has their version of an incredible story. And it's almost selfish to not share that with people, dude, because you can help so many people through doing it. But where do you feel like personal brand, content, like where do you think this is all going, and how are you going to incorporate it into your businesses?
I think I don't want to say it's the future because it's already here.
Mm-hmm, it's already here.
Yeah. Oh. I think just more people are going to start to pick it up. But you look at kind of the essence of humans, like we are inquisitive people. Mm-hmm. We want to know what others are doing. We are very observant and visual, right? So I think that's why video podcasts have become really big, and YouTube. But I think just like what you're seeing in CPG and direct consumer, how consumers are marketing a product on TikTok and then they're driving sales, you're going to start to see a lot of the big B2B brands working with influencers to promote their products to users. So I think the trends are real. I think people are now starting to buy from people they trust or believe in. You can't just be a founder behind a wall. Sure. Some industries you get away with a lot longer than others, right? In staffing more than in my sleep business per se.
Sure.
But people want to find ways to relate, right? And I also think, and I'll speak for myself, why I like following people, certain individuals are looking is like, I want to find people that maybe I can relate to that I don't have proximity to, right? So like, there's only so many entrepreneurs in Denver, but if I can, you know, connect on YouTube with other entrepreneurs in Houston and Dallas and New York, I can start to see what other people are doing where I want to be, right? And so the visual side gives the proximity. And most people, you know, don't know what good looks like, is what I like to say. You know, out of the 10 entrepreneurs I'll talk to, most of them are figuring it out on the fly. There's not many that have true mentors who've built multiple businesses and they got the third business the right way because they saw what good looked like. And so for me, that's really what, as a brand individual, I'm going to focus on, like helping people see what good looks like from the inside out.
Dude, I love that. So does that mean you're launching a podcast, Jason?
I don't know. The ISO might be coming to you soon.
Well, thanks for coming on, dude. This was a ton of fun.
Absolutely.
Remind people where they can find you again.
Yeah, so Ayachi on Instagram. You can go to my executive search brand, propersg.com, and then my sleep business is really_awesome_products. But yeah, I look forward to having you all follow me, and hopefully today was helpful.
Go follow him, guys, and he'll do an announcement if and when he decides to launch his podcast, but it's one I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, we'll see if he has anything to do with it. It'll get launched tomorrow.
Right on, brother.
Awesome,
hey,
man.
Seriously, thanks for coming on.
Appreciate it.
Turn that loss to a check. Every time that I see a limit, I push right past it. Don't care if you got here first, the one to win is the last one standing. Say my life is like luck, nah.